Good morning. Today we will be discussing international monetary system. Here we will discuss the gold standard, and second session 4 we will be discussing about paper currency standard. Let us start with the gold standard. Gold standard, if you see the economic history, one of the important requirements are the exchange of currency, because we have different nations have different trade relations. The trade relation take place through currency. The currency requirements is here gold or any other metals. However, economic history till 19th century, gold was important what we call a requirement or important assets for peoples. On that basis of gold, the currency system developed, and it has been switched over to silver standard, after that some other metallic standard, and eventually the paper currency standard. The question is here, why gold is so important? If you see the history, almost from the dawn of the history, gold was considered as the medium of exchange. Why it is considered the medium of exchange? Because gold was durable in the sense that it has a value, storable, very easy to store it, portable, you can carry the gold and go to the different market, and also easily divisible. Gold can be divided into minute grams. On that basis of that, the minute level of currency can be considered. The foundation of the gold standard is that currency value is supported by some weight of gold. Gold in the form of coin, in the form of bar, in the form of large value coin were circulated earlier, and they were considered as the currency for the different country. There are different kind of gold standard. If you see, we have pure gold standard, where gold coins were traded freely and their inherent values were considered as their market value. Gold coins were circulated, on the basis of the inherent value, that is how much gold contained on in that particular coin, the currency system developed. And since under the pure gold standard system, all participating currency were convertible based on the gold value, because different country designed the currency on the basis of gold, and golds were freely traded among the nations, and there was no barrier in the movement of gold from one country to another country. This was essential because purity of gold and the gold itself is as a currency. Without the free movement of gold, you cannot decide the value of the currency or the exchange rate. The pure gold standard was continued till 1970. Under the as per the pure gold standard, currency were just like that butter system. It was butter system where the product itself converted in products itself exchange, gold coins were exchanged. However, over the years, when the gold requirement, when the country expand, the economies of different country expand, the requirements of gold could not be fulfilled, because on the basis of circulation of currency, the country can expand, because liquidity requirement is essential to develop the economy. Gold, the limited gold was available in the world level. Very few mines were there, and soon when the economies of different country expanded, the requirements of gold filled more, and people were that pure gold standard could not continue. However, under the relative gold standard, the currency and the relative gold standard, currency standard also developed. Each currency on the relative gold standard, each currency was converted into gold as a specified rate. Gold was freely imported, freely exported, and also the conversion of gold into currency or the conversion of currency into gold fixed by a different country on the basis of the specified rate. Exchange rate between two currency was determined by the relative convertibility rate. The relative convertibility rate here is meaning that some country may decide that 10 grams of gold is equivalent to 100 rupees, or some other country like US suppose decide 10 grams of gold equivalent to $200. On that basis of that, the exchange rate determined between two US and India. Here the relative gold standard provides some kind of freedom to the country, because on relative gold standard the value of the requirements of gold was not so much, because here gold, the value of the gold is not the directly linked to the currency, however indirectly linked to the currency, in the sense that the country can decide what should be the amount of gold which can be converted into 100 rupees, 200 rupees or 500 rupees. So, the requirement of gold, though it is there, however liquidity can be generated in the economy on that basis of requirement of the country. However, the fundamentals of the gold standard, the fundamentals of the gold standard depends upon the what is called mint parity theory. The mint parity theory, on the basis of that entire metallic standard developed. The mint parity theory that under this system the currency in use was made of gold or it was convertible into gold at a fixed rate. The value of the currency unit was defined in terms of certain weight of gold, that is so many grams of gold equivalent to rupee or dollar or pound or any other currency. Means here the underlying asset is gold, on that basis the standard or the currency standard developed. But it may be pure gold standard, or it may be a relative gold standard. However, the underlying asset on which the currency standard developed was gold. The gold value, the gold was freely imported, freely exported. On the basis of demand of gold, the value of the gold also changed. That there was international gold market where the demand and supply of gold decide the value of the gold. However, different countries have different standard for the currency. On the basis of the amount of gold or the grams of gold, they decide their own currency. The rate at which the standard of money of the country was converted into gold was called mean price of the gold, because the country developed their monetary standard on the basis of amount gold. The coin or the gold coin, how much gold coin equivalent to the respective currency, that was decided by the respective country. And the official price of the gold in respect of country was called mean price of the gold. The mean price of the gold may be different from different country, because as I mentioned that underlying asset on which the monetary standard was developed is the gold. However, the actual exchange rate between this currency would vary above or below the mean parity rate by the cost of shipping of gold between two countries. As I mentioned from the beginning that the basic requirement of the gold standard was there is a free trade among countries. The free movement of goods and services was there. There was a free movement of gold from one country to another country, and respective country decide only the value of their currency on the basis of the underlying asset, that is gold. Whenever there is a gold transported from one country to another country, it was actually transported by not transport, because when there is export or import take place between two countries, the exported country export and import decide on the basis of mean price of the gold. The export item converted into mean price of the gold, similarly imported item converted into mean price of the gold. Actually the gold was transported from one country to another country. However, since the gold was converted into in the form of currency, the currency in place of gold, it was currency transport from one country to another country. So, the main price of the gold is the minimum price, and shipping from gold from one country to another country depends on transportation cost. If the main price of the gold is less than the shipping cost, then gold will not be transported, however, the currency will be transported. So, here we have a two different concept, mean price of the gold and gold exchange, gold transportation point. So, we have to understand that suppose there is we discuss this principle in the form of one example. If the official British price of gold was 16 pound per dollar per ounce, and the official US price of the gold is 12 per ounce, then there will be mean price of gold between US and England will be 2, because here the exchange between dollar and pound would be fixed at 1 pound will be $2, because in official price of the gold in US is higher than the official price of the gold in London. So, the exchange rate between pound and US dollar depends upon the mean price of the gold. If the mean price of the gold, since the mean price of the gold in US is less than the mean price of the gold in London. So, that exchange rate fixed at 2, the mean price rate, that is the mean price rate between US and London. Actual exchange rate would be different from the mean parity rate, because the currency here is the dollar and the pound. However, the underlying asset is the gold. On the basis of gold rate, the exchange rate has been taken place. However, suppose there is US has a deficit in balance of payment with respect to Britain. It means that US need to pay more in the form of dollar to Britain. So, Britain there will be receiver of dollar, however, US has to send dollar because US has deficit balance of payment. Suppose US importer would demand more pound to pay deficit budget. Here the shipment of gold involve cost. That cost is the transportation of gold from US to Britain. Suppose the transportation of gold, the shipping charges between US to Britain is 5 cents. So, the US importer would pay $2.05 per 1 pound sterling, because if 2.05 per, suppose 1 pound is more than $2.05, then US importer would not pay dollar, rather than they transport gold from US to Britain, because the transportation cost is 2.05 along with the price of the dollar is 2.05. It suppose that the pound sterling is 1 pound sterling would be $2.10, then it is beneficial for the US importer to transport gold rather than pound sterling, rather than dollar. If the exchange rate would be beyond the $2.05 per pound, then importer would ship pure gold only. This is called actual exchange rate between US and Britain. The question is, here we have two kind of rate, what is called a mean parity rate. The mean parity rate actually the value of gold in two different countries. We have actual exchange rate, which depends upon mean parity rate along with the cost of transportation. The cost of transportation is added with the mean parity rate, and on that basis that actual exchange rate takes place between US and other country. Here we understand that the value of the gold or the price of the gold is the underlying asset, and along with the transportation cost of gold from one country to another country decide the exchange rate between two countries. You have to understand another thing here, the mean parity theory determine the determine two things. One is the exchange rate, one aspect. Second aspect, the how the differential price of gold between one country to another country. No doubt gold is a international asset, but international level of demand and supply decide the exchange rate. However, in different country the rate of gold, the cost of gold or the price of the gold differ on the basis of availability of gold. The availability of gold here is the export import. If the country is export oriented country, exporting more than importing, then they are the receiver of the gold under the gold standard. If the country is import oriented country, importing more than exporting, the country is a deficit country. Here the price of the gold will be more. Hence, on this basis, price of the gold will be more. On this basis, the exchange rate takes place among these two countries. Let us understand that there are different concepts in the mean parity theory. One of the important condition is here, the mean parity theory determine not only the exchange rate, also automatically correct what is called the balance of payment, when balance of payment deficit or surplus. Currency here convertible in gold, nation could ship gold among themselves to adjust their balance of payment. Since under the gold standard there is free export or import of gold. So, gold freely move from one country to another country, the balance of payment automatically corrected under the gold standard. As the mean theory mentioned that either the trade or the deficit in the balance of payment automatically corrected under the mean theory. For example, suppose we discuss about the bilateral trade between Australia and Brazil. If Brazil had a trade deficit, that is Brazil is importing more from Australia and Australia is exporting more to Brazil than is importing. So, there is a Brazil had a trade deficit with respect to Australia. Under the mean parity theory, it means that Brazil need to pay more gold to Australia, and this required that there should be exchange of gold or the exchange of currency, dollar or the Brazilian currency between Australia and Brazil. Suppose in this context, how the automatic balance of payment correction take place, you have to discuss that. With more inflow of gold to Australia, it is from Brazil. Brazil is sending, because Brazil have the deficit trade with the Australia. Brazil need to send gold to Australia. Australia receiving more gold, and what does it mean? It means that supply of currency in Australia would increase. Suppose Australia in paper currency standard, that means the underlying asset is gold. On that basis, the paper currency develop, and the paper currency will be supplied more in Australia because Australia receiving more gold. There will be more supply of money in Australia. So, new bills will be created in Australia, and when there is more supply of currency, the value of the currency decline because of inflation. The inflation reduces the value of the currency or the purchasing power of Australian people. So, the Australian goods and services will be more costlier. Now, since Australian goods and services are more costlier, the demand of Australian goods and services will be less from the rest of the world, and so also for Brazil. Brazil may not import more from Australia because Australian goods and services are more costlier. At the same time, Australian imports to other country decline, and automatically the Australia which enjoy the surplus balance of payment with respect to Brazil will get automatically corrected. On the other hand, it will be different for Brazil situation. Brazil since Brazil have a deficit balance of payment, their currency or the gold will be they have to send to Australia, and since the Brazil would not want buy more expensive Australian goods, because Australian goods are more dearer now, more price because of inflation in Australia. Brazil's demand of Australian good decline. On the same time, at the same time, the trade deficit of Brazil against Australia reduces over the year, and this lead to a position where the deficit balance of payment with respect to Australia for the Brazil get corrected automatically. At the same time, Australia having a surplus balance of payment with respect to Brazil get automatically corrected, and this situation lead to a what is called a zero balance of payment, or the balance of payment may not have any deficit or surplus against between Brazil and Australia. Why it is happening? Here you have to understand that there is a free flow of gold between Australia and Brazil. Second, whenever there is a deficit balance of payment or surplus balance of payment, the demand and supply of gold at the mint price or the exchange rate price automatically corrected, because of the cost of goods or the price of gold indirectly linked to the circulation of gold, because no doubt underlying asset is gold. On that basis, that paper currency standard or the other monetary standard develop. However, the supply of gold from one country to another country or the circulation of gold from one country to another country decide the exchange rate. When a country receiving more gold, the country bound to circulate more money in their own economy. When they circulate more money in the economy, there will be inflation, the cost of goods and services in that country increases, and this leads to fall in the demand and supply, fall in the demand of the goods in that particular country, and the export price because of the lower price of goods and services, they enjoy the export some kind of incentive in export. That incentive may not be there, and their export decline because of the price of the goods and services increase. At the same time, since the price of goods and services increase, other country may not import that good. In this process, the surplus or deficit balance of payment automatically corrected. We have to understand that mint parity theory provides some kind of adjustment in the balance of payment correction process. If you see as our earlier example, since there is a gold transport from Brazil to Australia, the goods and services in Australia will be cheaper, in Brazil will be cheaper. At the same time, goods and services, since Australia is receiving more gold, since they have to supply more currency in the economy, so there will be inflation in Australia, and price of the goods and services in Australia more. So, demand of Australian goods will decline. At the same time, Brazil may not import more from Australia. So, deficit balance of payment against Australia in case of Brazil will be corrected. So, there is a natural balancing effect or stabilizing effect in case of mint parity theory. The natural balancing effect or stabilizing effect will link to the money supply, and the both nations will get benefit because of the automatic correction of the balance of payment. The gold standard, there are many difficulties are there under gold standard. As I mentioned that gold standard, when gold standard requirements are different, at the same time the implementation of gold standard also very difficult. Here you have to understand why gold standard is so important, because the gold is such kind of asset where there is a demand is everywhere. At the same time, it is durable, it is what is called storable, and also the gold, as I mentioned earlier, gold circulation of gold depends upon some monetary condition. The monetary condition is here, there should be a free flow of gold from one country to another country. Whenever a country receives gold, they have to convert the gold into their own monetary unit in the form of either, suppose they supply more money in their economy, where a country is supplying gold or a deficit balance of payment balance of payment country, whenever they transport gold from one country to another country, the circulation of money in that country decline. So, the gold flow of gold from one country to another country create some kind of balancing effect. The balancing effect lead to what is called a correction in the balance of payment. When gold left from a nation, the ideal balancing effect would not occur immediately, because what the ideal balancing effect, you have to understand that when a country send gold from that particular country to another country, they have to reduce the money supply in the economy. How they will reduce the money supply? Because the underlying asset on the basis of what the gold standard developed is the gold itself. When gold is leaving in a particular country, that gold, the money supply in that country should reduce, and that is requirement, that is a basic requirement for a balancing effect. However, it is not automatically reduced. Many countries, the government may not reduce the supply of money in the economy, because gold has left from that country. It takes the economy to the phases of recession, unemployment, and which affect the entire economy as a whole. Because when gold left from one country, the country may face what is called recession, because they have to reduce the money supply. The money supply reduction lead to the production process also come down, and production process when come down or economic activity come down, there will be unemployment in the economy. And because of that reason, many countries, even though gold left from there, they may not reduce the money supply in the economy, and this automatic balancing effect may not occur. And without the automatic balancing effect, gold standard cannot continue. And realizing this, many nations with a balance of payment deficit often regulated to take appropriate measures to stimulate the growth, because gold standard cannot only control the deficit balance of payment. There should be reduction of money supply in the economy. The reduction of money supply takes place through increasing tax or increasing expenditure. So, automatic correction of balance of payment is not possible in an economy. When gold left from the country faced recession, unemployment, and economic activity become downgraded, and that required intervention on the part of the economic authority. So, that should be increasing tax or increasing expenditure to stimulate the growth. A government may not be in a position to do that, because there are many other effects of this gold standard. You have to understand that the interface of gold standard with the monetary standard of the economy is very intricacy. The intricacy process is the trade deficit. It linked to unemployment, it linked to recession, it need to tax reduction, and these are the intricacy process when gold standard is operating. And here trade deficit would precede, resulting chronic recession and unemployment in the economy. After the Second World War, the correction process was very stringent. So, after the Second World War, many countries discontinue the gold standard, realizing that it is not only not possible to control the economic activity through the gold standard. And after the Second World War, the many countries got their independence, and they frame what is called the International Monetary Fund, which take care of the monetary standard of the economy and the world as a whole. And in this process, the metallic standard, particularly the gold standard, abandoned, and many countries introduced what is called an inconvertible paper currency standard. It neither linked to gold directly or indirectly, and this process of gold standard discontinued after the Second World War, and many countries introduced the paper currency standard and become a member of the IMF for the monetary exchange among the country. Really, we have to, when you discuss about the monetary standard or the gold standard, there are many articles are there. References I mentioned here, you have to International Financial Management third edition. If you see the third edition of International Financial Management, the gold standard, Resnick and Urin, they mention the gold standard. Another is the multinational financial management by Madura. You can go through that and see how multinational different country adopted the gold standard and also forcefully abandon the process. Another book is a financial management by Shapiro. And also read some articles are there in the economic policy volume 1 in the InterScience publication. You can go through the article and try to understand the gold standard. Suppose you want to discuss the model question here. Model question here, I mentioned here one model question here. Write in brief the historical developments of international monetary system. Here, and second one is the discuss the with example operational aspect of gold standard. So, first question, the brief historical developments of international monetary standard. As I in the beginning of the lecture, I mentioned that the monetary standard or the gold standard is as old as the human history itself. From the barter standard, barter exchange of goods and services, to a metallic standard, that is particularly the gold standard, the economy passed through over the years. The gold standard continue more than 300-400 years, and over the years people realized that gold may not continue as a monetary standard because economy is expanding. There are economy is expanding, one aspect. Second aspect, that when in a expanding economy you need more supply of currency, and supply of currency linked to gold, and gold itself linked to the mine. And in the world level the mines of gold is very few. The amount of gold circulation is limited in nature. In a limited nature gold circulation, economy cannot expand, because for expansion you need more gold, because the monetary standard depends upon the gold amount. So, when you write the international monetary system, you have to write from the barter system. The barter system, what are the problems people face? After that, you write about the gold standard, and gold standard you mention the why gold is considered as a monetary standard, because the price of the gold almost remains stagnant. There is free circulation of gold, the gold is durable, storable, and also you can minutely divide the gold into different units, so that monetary standard can be developed on gold basis. And also you mentioned that what are the requirements of gold standard to function. The first requirement is that there should be free circulation of gold in the world level. Second is that the economy should not, economy means that monetary authorities should not interfere in the gold standard in the free import and export process. And also whenever there is a circulation of money on the basis of gold, either in the pure gold standard or you call relative gold standard, that underlying asset should always be gold. Under pure gold standard, gold value, it's the intrinsic value of the currency is nothing but the gold amount or the amount or the how many grams of gold is there. So, there is no problem in deciding the value of the gold or value of the currency. However, in the relative gold standard, the value of the gold depends upon how much gold the currency is having. Since gold is internationally acceptable asset, the international price is the gold price itself. So, different country may have different prices, however, this price is not so different as the world level, because there was a free circulation of gold among different countries. However, since a deficit country or a surplus country, the trade deficit or trade surplus automatically corrected under gold standard. A deficit country need to reduce the supply of money in the economy, because their deficit means they have to pay in forms of gold to other country. So, they have to reduce the money supply in the economy, so that price of the goods and services would increase, price of the goods and services would decline, and the incentive for export or should be there. At the same time, whenever there is a surplus country, when the surplus country receive gold, they have to circulate more money in the economy, the price of the goods and services will increase, the incentive they enjoy in exporting should reduce, and their goods and services costlier, so that their export also reduce, and whatever the surplus they enjoy in balance of payment would decline over the year. At the same time, in case of a deficit country, since the price of the goods and services decline, they enjoy more in export, and their goods and services will be demanded in the rest of the world. They will receive foreign currency or gold, and in this process they correct the deficit balance of payment. So, under the mean parity theory, which is the primary aspect or fundamentals of the gold standard, there is a mean price of gold and there is the exchange value of the gold. The mean price of the gold is the amount of gold itself. The exchange value of the gold depends upon the transportation cost. The transportation cost of gold from one country to another country. If the transportation cost is more, the exchange rate will be more, and it will be more than the mean price. When the transportation of gold is more than the mean price and transportation of gold is more than the exchange value, then it is better to transport gold rather than sending the currency. So, the fluctuation of currency, fluctuation of the exchange rate, all in between the transportation of gold. So, the fluctuation is very limited in nature. So, in case of our mean parity theory, or in case of our gold standard, the transportation cost determine the fluctuation rate. So, transportation cost, since determine the fluctuation rate, there is hardly any fluctuation of currency over the year because of the underlying asset is gold. The second question is here, discuss with the example operational aspect of gold standard. As we discussed in our example, the US and Britain, as I mentioned that when the dollar rate, the 1 gram or 10 grams of gold in US is $100, 10 grams of gold in US is $100, and similarly 10 grams of gold in Britain is 200 pound. The exchange rate between US dollar and pound sterling will be 1 pound sterling equivalent to $2, and this is a mean parity rate. And second aspect that since gold transportation between Britain and US is 0.5 cent. So, the exchange rate between two countries take place at 1 pound sterling will be $2.05. And the operational aspect of gold standard is that since the pound sterling and US dollar, the fluctuation depends upon transportation cost, the rate of exchange rate between US dollar and pound sterling never exceed 2.05. If it is more than 2.05, then it is better for the US importer or exporter, they will transport gold rather than wait for the currency to purchase from the market. So, the operational aspect, you have to define that gold point, there is a gold exchange point we call, depends upon the transportation cost. On the other hand, there are many other requirements for the gold standard for success. First requirement is that the value of the gold should remain constant. Constant means the sense that the international price of the gold, and the international price of the gold depends upon the supply and demand of the gold. Second thing is that since the gold is the underlying asset, on that basis different countries develop their currency standard, they should link to the supply of currency should be linked to the amount of gold they have. When they receive more gold, they should supply more currency. When the gold position decline, they should reduce the currency circulation in the economy, and this will automatically corrected what is called the balance of payment. And third thing is that the most important thing is that you have the operational aspect of gold standard is that the gold as an asset on the basis of which the currency system develop, the value of the gold remains standard. Just like we have a standard, the standard should not be changed. So, because if they change the standard, the value of the system cannot work. Similarly, on the gold standard also, the value of the currency depends upon the gold. If there is artificial storage of gold, or the artificially people store the gold, the international price will more, and this affect the entire gold standard all over the world. And you have to understand that the requirement of the gold standard in different country is same, because once you go out of the gold standard, there is other standard, metallic standards are there. The metallic standard people have, many country adopted the silver standard, maybe many other country also adopted other metallic standard. However, all standard linked to the gold. The underlying asset was gold, and all other standard linked to the gold. So, even though we adopt any other standard other than gold standard, however, linked to the standard with the gold, we cannot function without abiding by the gold standard requirement. The gold standard basic requirement is that there should be circulation of money or circulation of any currency depends upon the availability of gold, and there should be free flow of gold from one country to another country. Without that, you cannot have a standard which can consider as a metallic standard or a gold standard. Here we have to understand that I mentioned the operational aspect of the gold standard is another aspect, that many countries abandoned 1850 onwards, many countries abandoned their gold standard. However, they adopted other metallic standard linked to the gold standard, because underlying asset they consider the gold. So, while discussing about the operational aspect, we should also mention that so long as the underlying asset is gold, you cannot consider, you cannot have a such kind of monetary standard without abiding by the gold standard. The gold standard requirement is basic requirement, where free supply, free import, export of gold should be there, and gold should link to the monetary standard. When the gold country is importing gold, they should also import what is called, they should also abide by the requirements of the gold standard. Here we will, while writing the historical development, you should also mention the different countries, how they adopted different metallic standard. Like here you should understand that China, India, like Brazil, some other countries like country like your US and European country, they adopted gold standard along with other monetary standard also. However, over the year they realized that since gold standard is the basic requirement having gold, you cannot have other standard without abiding by the gold standard guideline. And second question, you have to, while discussing about the operational aspect of gold standard, you should also write the basic requirement of the gold standard. The basic requirement is here that free export import, free flow of gold from one country to another country. There is a free flow decide the mint parity rate, and there should be transportation of gold from one to another country that determine the exchange rate. And at the same time, when a country receive gold, they should increase the monetary base by supplying more currency in the economy. When a country in a deficit or the exporting gold or gold is outflow from that country, that time they should reduce their monetary base by reducing the supply of currency in the economy. And at the same time, whenever there is a deficit and surplus balance of payment, there should be free export or free import of gold. And domestic price of the gold should link to international price. There should not be any artificial increase of domestic price through tax or through any other activity, because the end of the day the gold is an international asset, and international price, demand and supply of gold determine the international price. On that basis the gold standard developed, and while having other operational aspect of gold is that there should be free flow of gold from one country to another country. And on the other hand, when you accept gold standard as underlying asset, on that basis you develop paper currency standard or any other metallic standard like silver, then also you have to abide by the gold standard guideline. The gold standard guideline mentioned here, as I mentioned here, the gold standard guideline is there that should not be any kind of trade barrier in the inflow outflow of gold. The trade barrier create artificial hike in the price, and when the international price is one and the domestic price is another, you cannot have a gold standard. Gold standard cannot function in that condition. So, tax principle, zero tax country, zero tax on the gold is essential for the gold standard. Nowadays, if you realize that though despite gold standard has been abandoned after the Second World War, now because many countries there are thinking processes going on to revive the gold standard, because gold standard create what is called a stable economy. Stable economy in the sense that there is a automatic correction of inflation, there should be automatic correction of balance of payment, there is a automatic correction of what is called the price situation in the economy, and also the circulation of money depends upon the gold. So, there is a what is called a control aspect on the part of monetary authority to in the form of creation of money in the economy. And nowadays thinking process is going on to create whether to revive the gold standard over, because when the current financial instability is because of excess supply of money, artificial hiking of interest rate, and also tax barriers. Now, the gold standard, this kind of things are not there. There is a pure monetary standard in case of gold, and gold as an international asset that the price of the gold depends on the supply and demand of in the economy. In the world level, people have decided that now economists have thinking process is going on, it is better to revive the gold standard, because gold standard have many positive aspects. At the same time, whatever the negative aspects are there in the gold standard, it can be controlled. The positive aspect is that the gold price is the underlying asset on the monetary system. Monetary system depends upon the supply of gold and demand of gold. So, there should be an automatic correction of balance of payment. Inflation or the price hike may not be there under gold standard, because gold itself decide how much money should be circulated in the economy, and there is a what is called a binding aspect on the part of central bank, on the part of what is called monetary authority, how much money should be circulated in the economy, and the deficit and surplus balance of payment, which create recession, which create unemployment, which create negative activity in the economy, automatically corrected under the gold standard. However, the many negative aspects are there in the gold standard, which can be corrected with monetary intervention. The negative aspect is that since amount of gold or the circulation of gold is very limited. So, when the world economy is expanding, we need more money in the economy. That can be corrected by not going for the pure gold standard, by going to a relative standard, where we can decide how much gold is equivalent to the number of currency. When we need more currency in the circulation, we can link to the relative standard of gold and decide the 1 gram of gold equivalent to how much currency. And in this process we can revive the gold standard, and monetary authority, the economist at present thinking the gold standard is the ideal standard of monetary requirement or the monetary standard in the world. In this process, let me finish this aspect gold standard, and we will discuss in the next lecture after the abandonment of gold standard, when the different country introduce the inconvertible paper currency standard, what kind of problem they face, and that will be our that will lead to our what is called and conclusion of monetary standard in the world, because the paper currency standard which was earlier in the earlier phase, primarily after 1945-47 till 1967-68 even it is also linked to gold. The US economy or US dollar was linked to some amount of gold, and all other paper currency of different country linked to US dollar. Indirectly we were also there till 1967 or 70, early 70 we were there in the gold standard. So, yes, US dollar was linked to gold. The US economy, how much dollar they should circulate depends upon the how much gold reserve they have. If they are having more gold reserve, they circulate more dollar. If they are having less gold reserve, they will circulate less dollar. And other country in the world link their currency to the gold standard, with the gold standard indirectly, because they link their currencies to the US dollar. And in this process, the exchange rate took place among different countries till 1970 by IMF in the form of paper currency to the US dollar and US dollar to the gold. And this process continued in 1970. After that, US abandoned the linking of gold to the own dollar, and this inconvertible paper currency standard now it is continuing, and in that the exchange rate is taking place through the purchasing power parity theory, and we will be discussing the purchasing power parity theory in our next session. Thank you.